Okay, I can see there's still some folks trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our December Early Learning Advisory Council meeting. Um, Thank you, Jessica. Just as a reminder, just a quick walkthrough of some of our virtual meeting protocols. Please just make sure to mute yourself, unless you are speaking or responding to a question. We do have some Q&A portions that are dedicated throughout the meeting, but also feel free to use the chat to post questions or comments at any time during the meeting. If you run into any technical difficulties, also don't hesitate to reach out to probably either Erin or Jessica through the chat, or you can email if you get disconnected from the meeting and have difficulty rejoining. Great, and we'll go to next slide. Great. For the purposes of time, we're going to do very quick introductions in the chat. So if you could just take a moment to share your name, where you're located, and your role, whether you're an ELAC member, whether you're a regional advisor, if you're a community member, if you could just take a moment and just enter that in the chat as a way of introduction. And we'll just give another minute or so as everyone's introducing themselves in the chat. It's nice to see so many people here this morning. Great. Okay. Well, please continue to introduce yourself, but we'll keep moving forward. Um, and we'll begin with a review of the meeting minutes. And copies of the October ELAC meeting minutes were sent out in advance for everyone to review. Thank you, Jessica, for placing those in the chat. What we're going to do is give a few minutes now for folks to review if you didn't have opportunity to do so. And then we will move forward to see if there are any questions before taking a vote on the minutes. So why don't we take a few minutes right now just to review those October minutes before we move forward with taking a vote. And I noticed a few people just joined. So Jessica, I'm wondering if you could put the link back in the chat again for folks to access the meeting minutes. Thank you. I'm going to give about 2 more minutes and then I'll check in to see if there are any questions before we vote on the minutes. So 2 more minutes. Yes, Melissa, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't have a disagreement with the notes or anything like that. Just I have a question about the phrasing that I think it might be a good subject for conversation. So on page 1 at the bottom, there's a bullet that says an example of racist practices, and it refers to mostly women and many women of color. What it's actually saying is white women and women of color, but what's happening is it's normalizing women in the speech, like the way that the grammatical is put together. It's normalizing white women and then othering women of color. And I would suggest that going forward, we use terms like women from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. If that makes sense.
Great, thank you for sharing that feedback. I'm going to turn to Aaron to see if that's definitely we need to take a vote on minutes, but is that something that can be updated to reflect a change in the language on in the minutes?
For sure. Yeah.
Great.
We can update that.
And did you catch everything that was said for the change?
I think I got it. And then I can connect with Melissa also when I'm adjusting that if I miss anything. If that's okay, Melissa. Yeah. Volunteering you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
thank you.
I really appreciate that, Melissa. And I'm wondering, could you enter it in the chat? That way we can really capture your statement there.
Yes.
Thank you. I think since we're starting with some questions with the minutes, are there other questions or comments that anyone has in reviewing the meeting minutes? Okay, so if there are no other questions or comments, and thank you, Melissa, for entering the language change in the chat. Going to move forward now with voting on the, oops, I'm seeing, okay, sorry, just seeing a lot of chat. Just want to make sure not missing any questions. Now we're going to move forward with voting on the October meeting minutes. And again, this is going to be a vote on the meeting minutes with the language change that's been suggested by Melissa, and that language change is in the chat. And as a reminder, only ELAC members and regional advisors vote. So if you can please place your vote in the chat, you can indicate thumbs up, thumbs sideways, meaning that you can live with the minutes, or thumbs down, meaning that you have disagreement with the minutes. It is fine to write your vote into the chat if you do not have symbols to use. So go ahead and start voting. And maybe Erin and Jessica, you can let me know once you've captured the chat. Okay, Erin and or Jessica, do you have what you need from the vote in terms of the count? Oops. Oh, you're muted, Erin.
Sorry about that. We don't have everyone, but I think we've definitely gotten a majority.
Oh, it looks like
So got a couple more.
Got a few more coming in. We'll give another minute. Not a problem. So again, all ELAC members and regional advisors can vote on the minutes.
I think we're good, Enrica.
Okay, great. Thank you, Erin. So next we're going to take a look at the feedback loop. And for anyone new at ELAC, the feedback loop is one of our standing, excuse me, one of our standing items at ELAC meetings. It's just a way to provide updates and follow up on questions that have been raised during previous ELAC meetings. Thank you, Jessica, for putting a copy of the feedback loop in the chat. The feedback loop was also sent out by email as well. So we'll take a few minutes to quickly walk through that document and share some highlights. So contained in the feedback loop are a couple of updates related to lived experience compensation. There's also a recruitment announcement for the ELAC Executive Committee. And I want to turn your attention to the FSKA recommendation report update that you see in the feedback loop, because there is going to be actually an adjustment made to the update that you see in that current document. And that adjustment is being made in order to increase clarity, that there is no longer an opportunity to provide comments for consideration for the FSKA recommendation report. That comment feedback period has closed. There's also going to be an adjustment made to that update just to make it really clear about sort of the next stages of the report in terms of the formatting and the approving process. And I'm going to turn it to Erin just to make sure that I didn't miss anything as it relates to some of the changes, some of the adjustments that are going to be made to that particular update.
No, but if anybody else has questions or found anything confusing about the update, feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Yeah. So are there any questions about the feedback loop? Okay, since there are no questions, we'll just move forward. And we'll talk about the state agency and partner updates. This is just an example of another item that we have at ELAC meetings. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the document in advance, and Jessica has placed a copy in the chat. There's lots of information contained in this update, and you'll find updates from DCYF in that document. In addition to updates from DCYF, you'll also see some updates from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, Department of Health, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I believe there also may be representatives from OSPI, DOH, and the Department of Veterans Affairs in attendance who might be able to address any questions that come up as you review those updates. So I'll give a couple of minutes for folks to take a look at those updates, and I'll check in to see if anyone has any questions. I'll give another minute for folks to review those updates. Okay, are there any questions about the state agency partner updates? Okay, so if there are no questions, we're going to move on and touch on the Regional Coalition and Washington Communities for Children's updates. And these are also another example of a standing item that we have at ELAC meetings. It just provides opportunities for the regions to share updates when they have them. This is another document that contains quite a bit of information. So hopefully you've had a chance to review it in advance. And thank you again, Jessica, for placing a copy of that document in the chat for everyone to access. I believe that there are representatives here from many of the regions. So I'd like to extend an invitation to regional advisors to share any additional information about activities occurring in the respective regions if they'd like to do so. Just an opportunity if you'd like to. We'll give about 2 minutes for folks to review the Regional Coalition and Washington Communities for Children updates, and then I'll check in to see if there are any questions. Okay, are there any questions or comments regarding the Regional Coalition and WCFC updates? It looks like there are no questions or comments. So I want to do a quick check-in with Aaron just to check to see our next presenters here. Are we able to move forward?
I'm scrolling through now,
Right.
but is Adasa on the call? Or Justin? Looks like they might not be on quite yet.
Okay. So it looks like maybe we can take a 3-minute break because they are both scheduled to be here at 10:45. So why don't we take 3 minutes for a quick break and then we'll rejoin at 10:45 for the presentation from OIAA.
Hi, Adasa. They're just taking a couple-minute break before jumping in.
Hey, Erin, no problem.
Yeah, they should be back in about 1 minute.
And will Justin be joining as well, or will it just be Adasa?
Yeah, I think Justin will probably come in like a minute or something.
Okay, perfect. Okay, it's 10:45 and no, I'm going to turn everything over to Adasa Butrovich Ryan. Adasa is DCYF Fair Starts for Kids Act Senior Evaluator, and also turning it over to Justin Seppi, FSK Analyst, and both are here to provide data updates as well as an overview of key findings from the 2023 Legislative Evaluation Report. I'll turn it over to Adasa and Justin.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here, good to be back. I'm just gonna take a second to share my PowerPoint. Does that look right on everyone else's end?
Yes.
Cool. All right, well, thanks for having us back. My name is Adasa Bedrevich Ryan. I'm the Fair Start for Kids Act Evaluator. I have with me Justin Seppi, who's the FSK analyst, and we both work in DCYF in the Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability. And we just wanted to come back today to sort of level set and kind of remind everyone about our work and what we're doing. We're going to share some findings from an evaluation report that we recently submitted at the end of September of this year, and then just leave it to some questions or comments and suggestions from you. So let's start with some background. So I am sharing a quote from the FSK legislation, where basically it is asking DCYF or OIA to create an evaluation report that discusses the impacts of the FSKA funding on 4 different policy objectives. And here are the 4 policy objectives that it asked us to look at: advancing racial equity, expanding access to childcare and early learning, promoting kindergarten readiness, and supporting the childcare and early learning workforce. So we submitted a report that had over 25 drafts with 13 plus stakeholders reviewing it and providing feedback. It took about 9 months of writing and analysis, all culminating to a 50-page report. We're not done yet. There's another one that's due in 2025. And so in between these 2 times, we are going to continue conducting some of the same analyses that we did for 2023. And we hope to set up a FSK data website where this report from 2023 will live. There'll be these supplemental data analyses that I just mentioned, potentially new dashboards on there, and just kind of helpful resources that are related to FSK data. And so another sort of piece of background that I wanted to share is our FSK logic model. We try to show this every time we come to visit, just because it's kind of our guiding document. And it's just kind of helpful for understanding what we're trying to do, where we're going, and how we're going to do it. So I mentioned the 4 FSK policy objectives that are laid out in the legislation, and we included them here in the long-term outcomes column. And this is kind of a map showing us how we're going to get there through FSK. So what we start is with our resources. We have the founding legislation, we have staff, data, partnerships, and all these things sort of lay the foundation for all of the FSK strategies, activities, and programs. And so these programs and grants and things like that all have sort of output data where we collect things like the number of children served or the number of funds that were distributed and things like that. And so in the outcome metrics section, this is kind of where OIA, or evaluation analysis, this is where our work lives. So based on the long-term outcomes and all the work and all of the on-the-ground data that's being collected, we sort of try to look at patterns and trends at a high level to see how FSK implementation is going. So for advancing racial equity, we looked at data related to expulsions. For access, we looked at data related to provider supply and childcare need. And then for kindergarten readiness, we looked at the WAKIDS assessment. For supporting the workforce, we attempted to look at worker turnover, but we'll get more into that in a second. And so, yeah, this has been sort of our map this last year. And now we kind of want to share what we found from each of these 4 areas. And so let's start with equity first. So with equity, we chose to look at childcare expulsions. And we know that engaging in the practice of expulsion, it's an equity issue. The reason is because preschool age children tend to be expelled at higher rates relative to children in the K-12 system. And we also know that children of color are also expelled at higher rates. There's also some initial studies that looked at expulsions in childhood, and they found later associations with incarceration and arrests as well. And so within FSK, there are certain initiatives, grants, programs that are aimed at preventing expulsion. So, for example, we have the equity grant that happened, and there's also infant early childhood mental health consultation, which provides early learning professionals with tools to manage challenging behavior in the classroom, as well as sort of bolster up some of that social emotional capacity. And so the way that we measured expulsions in OIA is, I'm actually using a graph from the 2023 Equity Metric Report, which a different group in OIA did. And so what they did was they calculated preliminary racial and ethnic disproportionality ratios for expulsions across licensed care from 2018 to 2022. And you can see that this graph goes from 0 to 1. And so a value of 1 means that the group, BIPOC or white, is getting expelled at a rate higher than how they show up just in the general population. And so we see that across time, both of these groups didn't really ever go above 1, which is good. That means there isn't like a over-representation or a disproportionate number compared to how they show up in the general population. And if we look, especially after the pandemic and after FSK was implemented in 2021, we see a decrease in the rate of expulsions for both groups. But the decrease is much steeper and more pronounced for the BIPOC group. So this is a promising finding. We're seeing that expulsions are decreasing over time, especially for BIPOC children. Something to note is we are unable to attribute this decrease to FSKA. There basically needs to be a large data reform with expulsions, both in how it's reported and how DCYF collects it. we're finding initial evidence that the way expulsions are being reported is they're describing something else that's happening that's not expulsion. And different counties across Washington state, basically there's a lot of expulsions concentrated in some counties and not in others, so we don't really have like a representative sample. So a lot of things need to change. And the other reason we can't attribute to FSK is we do want to do this analysis, we just haven't been able to get the data yet, is to try to correlate whether how expulsions are being affected, reduced, increased, the more infant early childhood mental health consultants we set up across the state. So these are just kind of some caveats as well as some future directions that we want to head into. And so just keep thinking about things that you'd want to see too, not just in this area, but in some of the other findings that I'm going to share. All right, let's move on to access. What did we find? So couldn't mention access without mentioning one of the biggest initiatives or areas of funding within FSK, which was the federal child care stabilization grants. And these grants, really their main aim was to help increase the number of providers. And if you were a provider and you were sort of operating in a priority geographic area, you got even more money. So if you were a provider that was operating in an extreme childcare access desert or an area of high child maltreatment, somewhere where there was high childhood poverty, racial disparities in kindergarten readiness, you were a provider serving or located in a community of color, you got an additional $10,000 per area that you were operating in. And the reason why this is related to access is because an increase in the number of providers is an increase for access to families. So we know that childcare and early learning, it's a dynamic system. There's constant entries of providers and exits of providers where they're opening licenses or closing licenses. And in OIA, we pay attention to three parts of this dynamic. We look at the total number of providers year to year. We look at the number of providers who entered that year by opening a license and the number of providers who left that year by looking at those who closed a license. And so what did we find? This graph on the left shows the total number of providers year to year, and we also disaggregated it by program type. So center, home, school, age, and outdoor. You can see that, from 2019 to 2022, it's pretty stable, the total number of providers year to year, and that's true for what program you are. The graphs on the right deal with entries and exits. So we, rather than just looking at the number, we also calculated a rate. And so in an ideal market, we want to see a higher entry rate than an exit rate. Makes sense. So the way that we calculated it was we divided the total number of entries in that year divided by the total number of just providers who started that year. And it was the same for exits. And so what we found was that, after the pandemic, after FSK was initiated, we saw that the entry rate significantly increased, especially for homes. It was a similar pattern for childcare centers where the entry rate increased. It just wasn't as steep. So nonetheless, these are some, positive trends that we're seeing. But we wanted to dig deeper. We wanted to know, are there more of these entries or increases in provider supply in those priority areas that I mentioned earlier, where providers would get paid extra for operating in kind of these higher need areas? So what we did is we calculated a gap. We subtracted the exit rate from the entry rate. a desired outcome for this analysis was to see a positive number, because that means there's more entries than there are exits. And just to get a little more technical for just a second, the specific analysis we did was a difference in difference analysis, where we're able to plot a counterfactual group. That's what this gray line is. And from that, we're able to estimate the treatment effect. So this gray line tells us, it predicts what things would have looked like if FSK hadn't existed at all. And so what we found was that for almost all of the priority areas, there was a positive treatment effect, and it was strong. It was like a fairly large sort of like effect size. So that means that there were providers entering in all of these areas, not so much the high COVID impact area. So when we combined all of these priority areas into like a statewide analysis, we were actually able to calculate what that means in terms of number of providers. So just in 2022, there was an additional 465 providers that entered the market that year, especially in areas that needed it. So this is great. So we really liked this difference in difference analysis, and we want to, in 2024 and 2025, continue it both for entries and exits, but we also want to look at how this impacted licensed capacity and childcare continuity as well. So again, just sharing some ideas that we want to do for the future.
Adasa, there is a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Let me see. Okay.
Now 2 questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to take them now or if we want to take them at the end.
I can take them now.
Okay.
Is there any tracking of the reasons for exiting? That's a good question. As far as I know, we look at it as whether they close their license. Justin, not to put you on the spot, but do you know if there's any data in WA Compass that states a reason why a license was closed?
There are some generic selections from in there. I don't think it wouldn't lead to great qualitative data necessarily, but it's something that we could look further into. I think there's also the issue sometimes of who is selecting what that closing reason could be, and if it is truly encompassing the real reason why someone closed, we need to take a further investigation into it though.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so something for 2024 for sure. Okay, let me see. What is the number of childcare providers that exited? Oh, did I think I forgot to drop the report in earlier.
I can grab it for us real quick.
So Susan, I don't know that number off the top of my head. There's a number of providers that exited, and it's a different number for each year, I think. I don't know the total, but we do have this in the report for sure.
Thank you, because I was just curious, because this could be where there's the net effect, where there's an entry and an exit, where there's a net zero. And in this, that's why I'm curious what the actual, you were able to give the number of the actual entries. So I was assuming you would be able to give the actual number of the exits as well.
Yes, totally.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In regards to tribes certified for payment only, providers' data wouldn't be captured in this data. Is that correct? Do you know, Justin, if we included licensed centers that were tribal affiliated in this analysis?
Yes, if they have a childcare license, they should be in WA Compass, and we would have them in that data set.
I wonder if we should also disaggregate it here as well, just so we can see, like, for the future. Like, Wendy, you're making me think that in the future we should also disaggregate it by a tribal affiliation as well. Okay, and then thank you for adding the link. Cool. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. All right. So let's talk about what we found with kindergarten readiness. So, I'm sure we all know kindergarten readiness. It can be looked at in different ways. In terms of the kids, it's sort of these different domains where we look at math, literacy, reading, social, emotional. But we also know that it's how kids grow up, and a lot of systemic things impact development and things like that. And so there are kindergarten readiness skills, but schools also need to be ready for children as well. And so we know that about 80,000 kids enter kindergarten each year. And at this moment in time, overall, of those 80,000 kids, only 54 meet sort of those 6 out of 6 criteria on the WAKIDS assessment. And with FSK, we wanted to know, is this funding helping to increase that 54%? And we did a correlation analysis where we looked at 2021 childcare stabilization grants and whether that was correlated with 2021 to 2022 kindergarten readiness skills, and there wasn't much of a correlation. It could be because the years were too close together and we need to use kindergarten readiness data from later in time. It just wasn't available at the time that we wrote this paper. But as you can see, kindergarten readiness skills have been pretty stable over time, right? If we look at 2017 all the way to 2022, they haven't really changed much. We just know that there are a lot of multiple and complex factors that impact school readiness. And I think in future analyses, I think we want to get at more of that systemic piece, like why are things not changing as much? So that's kind of our goal. And if you have any ideas here, we appreciate it as well. So yeah, this one, relative to the other findings, this one was pretty, not much to say. So let's get into the workforce support. Oops. Again, this goes without saying, but we know that stable, nurturing, high quality interactions between children and adults is super important for development. But we also know that workforce turnover is some of the highest in education, especially in the early learning field. And so when there's turnover, it sort of disrupts those relationships. And so it's not great. And so we wanted to know, how is FSK impacting turnover at all? Since there were some strategies that were trying to, give more training and more funding for certain types of trainings and things like that. So we specifically wanted to know the extent that DCYF is recruiting and retaining diverse, experienced, skilled workers, and what conditions do they stay and do they leave. Sadly, we only had, even though we're trying to measure turnover, we only had 2 time points. And the reason we had 2 time points is because I might be a little hazy on this, but my understanding is that in 2021, there was a new policy where workers in DCYF became eligible for healthcare insurance, but you just had to activate your profile in the database that we collect all of the information for about workers. So that's why we thought 2021 must be the most reliable and active workforce that we have. So we looked at different groups of workers. We looked at their age, which is this graph right here. We looked at their education, race, ethnicity, language, job type, program type, quality rating, and again, only across 2 time points. So interestingly, overall, even though at the provider level, we saw that there were increases in the supply of providers in 2022, in terms of the number of workers, our merit / DCYF / healthcare eligible sample showed a slight decrease, like around 2,000 or so workers from 2021 to 2022. This is not the same story when you look at census data. In terms of census data, it did show that, you know, we sort of recovered our workforce since the pandemic. So, yes, kind of some interesting stuff going on. And when you dig deeper into sort of like who is staying, who is leaving, what conditions, we did find that the number of workers increased for those who identify as white, they're English speaking, hold positions of an aide or a teacher, and those who work in centers. And then sort of our DCYF merit healthcare eligible sample decreased for those who identify as Black and African American, Asian, Hispanic, Spanish speaking, and are in the younger age group, the 16 to 20 age group. We didn't really find much differences in terms of educational attainment or the quality ratings. And I mentioned we only have 2 time points. I think we just got 2023 data like a week ago. And so we are curious to continue this analysis, and we may put it up on the website or just update this somehow in like a 1-pager. But truthfully, OIA is working on this much more high quality, valid, reliable, complex worker model type of thing. And I think it's going to tell us a lot better about what we're finding in terms of workers. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, these are kind of just our, again, future directions that we're thinking. And the next part is kind of leaving it up to discussion, but I'm going to check the chat first.
Got a couple more that came through.
Oh, okay. Let's see. If the data wasn't available, why was it used as a benchmark? Was the department trying to tie direct center monetary investments to kindergarten readiness? Oh shoot, this is when I was talking about kindergarten readiness. Oh, I think this is when I said that we were, correlating 2021 data, readiness data with 2021 stabilization data. I guess I don't know if this is necessarily answering your question, but for me, the way that I saw this was, we were just trying to use like what was available, and this report I see as like kind of baseline of what were things like when FSK first was initiated. So kind of just like worked with what we had, and I don't think that we would, even if we did have the 2022-2023 data, it is kind of a weak analysis, and I would much rather focus on trying to show how systemic things are related to kindergarten readiness and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Okay, can you repeat what you said? Yeah, regarding the access to healthcare. Well, okay, let's go back to that section. So the reason why, so I don't know if you all noticed, but a lot of this data we start, from like 2017 or 2018, but here we started in 2021. One thing I'll add is that we wanted to look at turnover, but in this specific data system that DCYF has, it's never required when you end a job to mark that date. So we never know when people truly leave. So that was challenging. And then the other challenging part is because since we don't know when they leave, in 2021, when there was this new policy for workers becoming eligible for healthcare, we thought to ourselves, well, at least if they have to activate their account, that means they're still there. That means they haven't left yet. So that's why for us with this analysis, we treated 2021 as the true sample that we knew were active in that moment in time. So yeah, it's not the cleanest, but that was kind of our reasoning. Isn't sharing race optional in merit? How's the data validated? Oh, sorry, Justin. Or,
Oh, no, you're good. I was just answering Susan's question.
oh, okay.
That one.
As far as I know, I think it is optional to include your race and ethnicity in merit.
Mhm.
So, yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure how it is validated.
I believe for the merit database, I don't think race ethnicity is necessarily validated in any strong way, but in merit it is in many instances self-entered or entered by the employer, and then it is validated by the employer. And so that is kind of the validation method, is that somebody goes in and enters that they work at a certain location, a certain job, and then the employer goes and validates it, and then it's confirmed through UCYF.
So, thank you. Um, I think we might be out of time. Is it okay to?
Yeah, it's actually okay to
Oh.
keep going. I think it's fine to go to 11:25, and then we have another presentation at that time. So.
Okay, so if the data wasn't available, oh wait, sorry, I think I already read that. Okay, so if the data isn't relevant, it may be good not to share it, so it can't be used to say that direct investments do not impact kindergarten readiness. Providers are still financially reeling from the pandemic, and inaccurate information that can hurt further direct investments should not be shared out. Yeah, yeah, so there is, yeah, there is another data set that is much we'd like to use for future analyses, and so I think that one will tell us more compared to what we did. But yeah, in general, it is tough to impact kindergarten readiness. And it's been like that for years. So yeah, I'm not sure what to say about that one. Okay, so there were only 860 who accessed the premium free healthcare coverage. Yeah, so this data is about those who are eligible, not who actually received the healthcare coverage. Sorry, I was just catching up to everyone's comments, but I feel like that's everything. So yeah. I'll just share. This is how you can contact us. So yeah, let us know if you have more questions or comments. But thank you. Gonna stop sharing this screen.
Well, thank you so much, Adasa and Justin. And thank you for including your contact information. I sense there are a lot of maybe remaining questions, so that's great to have that opportunity to ask additional questions for clarification and information. So we're going to take a real quick break. It's 11:20 right now. If everyone can return at 11:25 for our next presentation, that would be great. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. It's 11:25, and so we're going to go ahead and get started again. And I'd like to introduce our next presenters. We have with us DCYF Director of Early Care and Education, Umberto Cruz Chavarria, with Samantha Bowen from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. They are both here to provide us with an update on transitional kindergarten. So I'll turn it over to Umberto and Samantha.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. It's so great to be here with all of you. I'm Umberto Cruz Chavarria. I'm the Director of Early Care and Education, and I will be telling you a little bit more about DCYF and how we're working with OSPI as it relates to transitional kindergarten, and then we'll transition over to Samantha as she will share more about transitional kindergarten, which is a request from the group that you had maybe a couple of months ago. So I'm excited that we were able to make it happen before the holidays, and we're truly excited to be here together and be collaborating. So I know you might already know all of the slides that I'm about to present, but it's great to set the stage and the foundation for why we're here, right? So our vision for early learning as DCYF is to have accessible and affordable, high quality early care and education for all of Washington's children, birth to 12, in order to support child outcomes, school readiness, and family well-being, regardless of race or income. So if we were to look at the, let's go to the next slide and then take a look at the specific strategic outcomes that focus on the early learning system within DCYF. And that is, number one, 80% of Washington children are ready for kindergarten. And high quality early learning is available and affordable in all of Washington. All of this while eliminating racial disproportionality and advancing racial equity in early education. Now, we have also gotten the questions around what is high quality? How do you define high quality, right? Beyond just answering, hey, we have early achievers as our quality framework. But by high quality early learning experiences, we are generally defining that as in terms of the whole child. What we mean with that is developmentally appropriate practices, relationship-centered practices in all of our classrooms, and a responsive and two-generational approach to early childhood education. Let's go to the next slide. I think the group has seen this already, but I'm going to leave it on the screen for a little bit so you can internalize it a little bit more. It is our early learning draft theory of change. So if we expand community access to affordable, high-quality early care and education and continue to improve quality in these settings for children, then all children will arrive in kindergarten ready to learn and have the quality care they need as they transition to the K-12 system. And providers will have the resources to provide quality early care and education that meets the needs of children and families. I'm going to leave this on the screen for 30 more seconds so you have an opportunity to read and internalize a little bit more. Okay, let's go to our next slide. We cannot provide high quality early learning experiences to all of Washington's children without having a mixed delivery model, right? In our universe of childcare and early learning, we have the many models that we rely on. So our family homes, our centers, our outdoor preschools, and also those classrooms that are located within schools or school districts. We have many levers to ensure that we are providing high quality early childhood education and that families and children have access to different kinds of settings, right? We have licensed childcare, we have our quality rating program or early achievers, our constantly expanding working connections or childcare subsidy, our 2-generational model, ECAP, and also other models that are across our state. We have Head Start, developmental pre-K, and transitional kindergarten. I know we're all waiting to get to that one. So that's why we're here today to talk about transitional kindergarten, right? As this part of this mixed delivery model that fits within our big childcare and early learning universe. Before we go there, if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to remind the group, I believe in previous rounds, we've talked about our decision packages. Also, these are available online, but I just wanted to highlight one specifically that's part of this 2024 supplemental decision packages based on HB 1550 that mandated DCYF to work with OSPI around coordinated recruitment and enrollment. So part of this supplemental DP that we submitted includes or requesting funding to have FTEs in our childcare aware of Washington regions to support with a coordinated approach to eligibility and enrollment in early care and education, which is really exciting. I also wanted to highlight something that I did this very last minute last night because before we transition and I hand it over to Samantha, I wanted to highlight some school districts across the state of Washington that are doing some really amazing innovative practices and working with the early learning community to ensure that transitional kindergarten is integrated into their systems. So I've identified 3 main trends across the different school districts here. So if we go to the next slide, I'm not going to go over all of them, but if the group is interested, I would love to come back and tell you even more about this. Like a lot of these we have a lot of qualitative data after talking with a lot of school district principals and superintendents, but I'm just going to highlight some of them. And again, if the group is interested, the ECAP team could likely come back and talk in depth about all of them. So one of the things that we saw across some of these school districts is how they're leveraging relationships and partnerships. So some of the exemplars that we saw out there, and this is not limited to these 2 school districts. Again, I just pulled from some of the data that we have is Everett Public Schools. So in planning for transitional kindergarten, they have developed a shared professional development for teachers and also coordinated enrollment strategies, including informing families when, if they qualify for a program other than transitional kindergarten, in this case, it's specifically ECAP, they would support the family in enrolling in ECAP programs rather than transitional kindergarten, just to ensure that, again, they have a coordinated approach to preschool. If we go to the next slide, beyond relationships and partnerships, other examples of coordinated enrollment include Valley School District, which was really impressive. They actually provide year-round licensed care on a school campus that includes a lot of our models in center-based. So I'm not including home-based in this example. So it has working connections, transitional kindergarten, ECAP, intuition-based program through braided funding. And one of the most impressive things is to see superintendents that are invested in early childhood education and who understand that these infants and toddlers are and preschoolers are the same children that are going to come to their schools eventually, right, when they start kindergarten. So they have been invested in their community, and for example, even in providing space and contracting or subcontracting with an organization or their local ESD to have different kinds of programming, not just transitional kindergarten. So again, if the group is interested, I thought it would be a great way to let you know what some of the school districts are doing and to see principals and superintendents being so invested in how do we integrate all of these things, right? And what we've heard from them is, you know, friends, it's complex to navigate the early learning world, even when you're a school district who wants to not just have transitional kindergarten, but have different models that support what the community needs. So I thought it would be great to highlight that before we transition to Samantha to tell us a little bit more about transitional kindergarten. So let's go 2 slides, go to the next, and I will pass it over to my colleague, Samantha, to give us some updates around transitional kindergarten.
Thank you, Humberto. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be back at ELAC. Just a little background for me. I am the Executive Director of Early Learning at OSPI. Prior to that role, I was an ECAP Administrator, Head Start Director. I've been an ELAC representative for the Early Learning Coalitions for many years when we first started this work. So very familiar with this group and the process. So really happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about TK. Before I jump in, let me just share with you the vision of OSPI. I think it's always important to just establish that foundation. So OSPI's vision is all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. And we do this through our work closing opportunity gaps and developing equity-based policies and supports. Our goal on the next slide, which really aligns with the work at DCYF, is all children having access to universal pre-K by 2030. And our first goal is that equitable access to those strong foundations, including universal pre-K. And so to do that, as Humberto outlined, we need this mixed delivery system, right? We need all programs, childcare, Head Start, ECAP, district programs such as TK, developmental pre-K. So I'm really looking forward to the collaboration with this group and with DCYF as we define and develop what this looks like as a state. So let's talk a little bit about TK. I do believe this may be the first time I've been here to talk about it. I'm not sure. So this is the definition basically of TK. So in this past legislative session, just earlier this year, the legislature authorized and established transition to kindergarten as a program for 4-year-olds and who have been identified through a screening process to be in need of additional preparation to be successful in kindergarten the following year. So really defining who we're targeting with TK was part of the work that happened during this leg session. When we look at House Bill 1550, there's a link in the PowerPoint on the next slide, and we can share this. I'm sure it's been shared previously, but really focusing on these 3 areas. First, that intent to continue and rename what we knew as transitional kindergarten to transition to kindergarten, directing OSPI to create rules for the program, create some guidelines and parameters for districts that are offering it. So today I will share with you specifically the rules. That's what I'm here to talk about. That's what I was invited to talk about today, was to talk about the rules. We'll talk a little bit about the initial rules, the emergency rules that were put in place for the 23-24 school year, and then look at the draft rules for 24-25. And then, as Umberto stated, in collaboration with DCYF, OSPI will develop statewide coordinated recruitment, eligibility, enrollment, selection, best practices for districts, and then provide technical assistance to implement those best practices. So the initial emergency rules were established for the 23-24 school year. So if you will go through to the next 2 slides, here we go. So these are the rules that were adopted for the current school year. Due to the short time frame from the end of session and the beginning of this current school year, OSPI opted to draft the initial emergency rules, informed by the language from House Bill 1550. So we extracted the language directly from the bill to develop these initial emergency rules. We did gather feedback from stakeholders prior to adopting these emergency rules, but the process was really quick because we had such a short turnaround time. The permanent rulemaking process, which I will talk about, allows us to go deeper into public feedback, open it up to public comment. And so that's where we are in our process now. So just to highlight emergency rules that went into effect this school year, there's some procedural, right? Purpose and authority provides OSPI the authority to adopt rules. The rules apply to common school districts, state tribal compact schools, and charter schools that are authorized to offer TK. There's some definitions. Notification of intent to offer TK. So districts are required to notify OSPI if they plan to open or expand a TK program. Rules around early learning coordination. Second column, we talk about staff qualifications, who's eligible for TK based on House Bill 1550, the minimum instructional requirements for the programs, and there's some apportionment, right? Some funding procedures that were written. How do we assess TK students? Our focus is using that WAKIDS assessment. And then there were some various fiscal amendments, again, related to apportionment, including TK in K-3 class size, requirements for physical, social, emotional support. So those are not programmed, but those are more based on the funding. So today, what I'd like to do is share a draft of the permanent rules and the process for developing the permanent rules. So we'll go to the next couple slides. And so here's the process. As I said, we filed the CR 101 form, which is for the initial rules. And those were the emergency rules. Those are in place currently. The CR 102, that's where we draft the permanent rules and we open it for public comment. So as soon as we can open or file the CR 102 is December 15th. So we'll be filing that around the 15th, and then it opens for public comment about 4 weeks later. So there's some procedures again with how that is handled. And so there'll be a hearing 4 weeks from the date we file the draft of the rules. And we will open it up for anyone who wants to testify, offer comments, and then also we will accept written comments via email. And then finally, we file the permanent rules, and we must have those adopted by the start of the next school year, so 24-25. So you will see, although the process will take a few months, we have to have those completed by August 1st for the next school year. So I hope this is clear. I'm trying to figure out the best way to sort of, on the next slide, show you where we're leaning into some changes. So to maintain the integrity and the intent of House Bill 1550, and based on feedback from our stakeholder groups, we have minimal changes to the areas highlighted in green. Now, I accept feedback on those. I am taking feedback. All of these will be open to feedback. Just so you know, as we're looking at the draft language, if you've reviewed the emergency rules previously, these are areas where currently the language has not changed much from emergency rules. So we may have adjusted the date. The emergency rules had the current school year, for example. So we've cleaned up some of the dates and the language, but the intent of these rules have not changed from what we filed in the emergency rules and what we're proposing for draft rules. Again, all of it's open to feedback. Just want to be clear, as we're talking today around where we see some changes, it will be in these areas that are not highlighted, and a new section that we are proposing to add. So I will focus today on local area early learning coordination and the assessment. So on the next slide, you'll see those two areas. So we want to strengthen the language in this area. And again, all these are subject to change as they go through the approval process and the review process. So I just want to note that this is very early draft language. So what you see on the screen may not be what's reflected in what is published in the permanent rules. Again, once it goes through OSPI review and we receive feedback prior to publishing the draft rules. So this is the current suggested language. So for local area learning, early learning coordination, the suggested language is that all eligible LEAs, so that would be our common school districts, tribal schools, charter schools, that administering a TK program are required to coordinate with local childcare and early learning providers to demonstrate need. So what we want to accomplish here is that coordinated recruitment and enrollment, and also some sort of a needs assessment or demonstrated need. And that process would be developed in guidelines that OSPI and DCYF draft. So that is the recommended direction we want to go with local early learning coordination, is strengthen that coordinated recruitment and enrollment, and districts must demonstrate a need for the program in their community. The other piece is that assessment piece for WAKIDS. Really not a big change. Currently, WAKIDS is required at the start of a program, just as it is with kindergarten. And with our TK program, it must be administered at least one more time. So we're looking at the beginning of the program and at least one more time during the school year to gather that data that we use for WAKIDS. So they will continue to use the same tool that we use through ECAP. It's TS Gold, but the whole child assessment piece must be administered at least one more time during the school year. And then finally, we have a new section, and this is where hopefully we'll obtain quite a bit of feedback from ELAC as it's being developed and from others. This is where we want to be really strong in our guidelines. So House Bill 1550 requires OSPI to draft guidelines that districts then must adhere to. So this is the section that requires that. And the 1550 calls out these three areas. Best practices for site readiness of facilities. So that's going to be, how do we ensure TK facilities are appropriate for 4-year-olds? How do we ensure those classrooms are appropriate for 4-year-olds? So that will be the focus of that guidance. Curriculum. So we will develop guidelines around what districts should implement as far as curriculum. We will not require a specific curriculum, since Washington school districts are local. What's the word? Local control. School boards make those decisions. Parents and communities make those decisions as far as their curriculum that is adopted. But OSPI and DCYF will partner on what we'd like to see in that curricula, what needs to be included as far as the components. And then professional development. So really focusing on professional development, aligning with DCYF on training and PD that is available for our teachers in alignment with what we're offering to our early learning providers. So we will go back to this. We'll revisit it because we wanted to leave enough time for feedback. So I just want to share on the next slide, we do have some current resources. These are all in the process of being updated to align with permanent rules. We have to wait until permanent rules are finalized to finalize these documents, but we're in the process of aligning these. We do have an administrator's best practice workbook that provides some guidance for districts who want to open a TK classroom. And we have our Washington State Full Day K guide, which is being updated to include TK, and then we have frequently asked questions. So these documents have been the guidelines that districts have used. So these will continue, they will be updated, but in addition, we will develop operating guide that are the requirements for a TK program. And also, of course, aligned with the Washington State Early Learning and Development Guidelines. And I think that's it. I think we want to open it up to questions. So hoping maybe to hear from you, and I'll look at the questions in the chat as well. But are there specific elements of the rules that resonated with you? And then as we look at those guideline areas, where should we focus to really make that content more compelling? And with that, I think I'm going to pause and open it up to questions.
And Samantha, there actually are a couple of questions in the chat for you.
I don't see any. I do see one, I think, is a question regarding eligibility. I'm concerned about the parity between public and private schools offering TK. Can you expand on what you mean?
Yeah, I sure can. I represent Washington Federation of Independent Schools, and many of our programs are concerned about the parity with being left out of those of the section offering eligibility to offer transitional kindergarten. Many of our pre-K through grade 6, 8, 12 schools would also like to be able to offer transitional kindergarten. And yeah, are feeling a bit left out and have questions about the process then.
Yeah, that's a great question. Jen, I wish I could speak to it. That was a decision that was made by the legislature. So that was not OSPI guidance or a specific requirement of OSPI. That decision was made by the committee that drafted House Bill 1550 of those that eligibility on that slide. Let's see, sorry, that was determined by the legislature in 1550. So they informed OSPI who could and could not offer TK. So I think those are great questions for our local legislators as we talk, and I'll definitely capture it as a question that came up.
Thank you.
So I appreciate the questions about process. I think I want to focus on rules. So right now we're talking about the rules. So I don't know that I want to specifically talk about enforcing rules, because that's not the role of OSPI. It will be our job to draft the rules, and its school boards are responsible for local implementation. And let's see, you talk about stakeholders, our tribe's part of the stakeholders. So absolutely. I believe we have some processes in place through our Office of Native Education for consulting with tribes. So I would lean to them to support that work. Through TK, happy to hear from you, Wendy, on recommendations or suggestions. So I'm not coming here claiming to have all the answers. I would love to hear from you, suggestions on any of this. Will the curriculum be required to be appropriate for 4-year-olds or districts? So we have a lot of data on, so the question is if they'll be able to teach kindergarten curriculum to TK students. So districts have local control over the curriculum they adopt. We will have a requirement for what we expect to be in a curriculum for TK students. And so feedback on that is appreciated. That was one of the areas that we're hoping to gather feedback on, was on that last section regarding developmentally appropriate curriculum. What I was starting to say, we do have some data on curriculum, and the majority of our programs are using the creative curriculum for preschool, aligned with ECAP. So as we look at our data, I believe it's around 80% of our districts are using creative curriculum. And then we have a very small percentage that have developed curriculum within district or adopted another curriculum. So Enrique, I think I would lean to you on how you want to gather feedback. If there's any feedback on the rules, I also put my email on the first slide. If individuals have comments on the rules, happy to collect them that way. But we really were hoping to leave some time for if there was any discussion around the rules. I do see another question. Are they utilizing TSG? WAKids, the assessment tool is my teaching strategies. So teaching strategies gold.
And
Yeah, and
Samantha, I'm gonna drop in the chat. Maybe, I don't know. I'm very visual, so I do know like there might be a lot of things, but I think you're specifically asking some feedback around best practices for site readiness, developmentally appropriate curricula, and then professional development opportunities, right?
Yeah, again, open to feedback on the language of any of the rules that are currently in draft. This is the opportunity. Once rules are adopted, they're adopted and they're really difficult to change. So if you have feedback on the permanent rules, the proposed permanent rules, would love that feedback. But yeah, I think when we get into the meat of it, what most people are concerned about is the developmentally appropriateness of a TK classroom. And the way we want to address that is through our guidance on the facilities, the curricula, and the PD that's offered to the staff. So really open to any comments, thoughts, or suggestions on how to best handle that. Wendy, I go back to your comment as well. Any feedback or suggestions on the best way to engage our stakeholders? This is the time to do it. We're open to that. That is what the beginning of 2024, that will be our focus, is feedback and engaging stakeholders. So we can think through some of these. We have one tribal compact school offering TK right now. Out of the 295 school districts, 133 are offering TK and serving just under 5,000 students. So a really small percentage of those 80,000 kindergartens that we talked about in the previous that are entering kindergarten. TK is a really small portion of the students, but it's still, nearly 5,000 of our 4-year-olds. So yeah, open to feedback on any and all of this, really.
yeah, and Samantha, I see a hand up, and also I was going to suggest if maybe you can put the slide that has the proposed rules back up so folks can be looking at that, since you're also asking for any feedback related to the language as it relates to those. But I'm going to turn it over to Susan since she's had her hand up.
Hi, thank you. So Samantha, I mean, as a licensed childcare provider, you can imagine that, I'm concerned that the rules are kind of on the light side, especially as they compare to the rules that licensed childcare have to comply with. So what I'm curious about in your process to get feedback with a public comment period, is there a way for OSPI to gather feedback from like for instance, through the Washington Child Care Centers Association or through ELAC or provider supports, so that we can have a different avenue other than the public comment period to offer our feedback?
I'm happy to join anything we're invited to share. The official avenue when developing rules is that hearing and that public comment period where and it doesn't have to be during the hearing. I'm open to any written comments. So if the group wanted to prepare written comments as a whole and submit those, right, do some work and submit public comment, we can accept those. Happy to attend a session and have a conversation around the rules. But so yeah, we're open to anything. I would say, Jessica, maybe, is it Jessica sharing? You could even share, here maybe. This shows all of the rules. The only one that's not included is that new one on the guidance, which Umberto popped into the chat.
I will just add for the record, there are literally hundreds of pages of rules for licensed childcare, and it's just very frustrating that a 4-year-old in a licensed program today could move into a TK program and the standards are so vastly different. So anyway, I know that's not anything you can do something about, Samantha, but I do think it needs to be noted for the record that that is a double standard that's really a hard pill to swallow. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for that comment. And I will just note that in addition to these rules that are specific to TK, any program operating in a school district would also be required to follow all of the rules as far as facilities and health and safety of a school district. There's also rules around special education. So what our hope is that these are the TK specific that we're required to draft for 1550, but aligning those and making those links to those other WACs and those other rules and those other requirements the districts must follow. So there's quite a bit of work to tell the whole story of what's required for a TK classroom.
Samantha, I just want to make sure that you're seeing the comments in the chat. And I know for me, in looking at this proposed permanent rules draft, one question that I have, or maybe it's a concern, is looking at the language around making a best effort to coordinate. I guess when I look at that, I wonder how that is defined.
Thank you. Enrique, that's actually one of, on the next page, that is one of the rules where we proposed a change. Again, it has to go through the process for approval, and certain people have to sign off on that language. But that is an area we hope to strengthen, is the requirement of that coordination and developing some sort of a needs assessment, or demonstrating the need in the community to open a TK classroom. So we do hope to strengthen that language. And as far as the comments in the chat, and Umberto and I are both capturing in our feedback notes, so that we're capturing all the comments. He's probably doing a better job than I am, because I'm trying to like be fast here on my reading, but.
Hi, Samantha, this is Wendy. I have a comment on so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So these are the drafts. This is the draft language. And then you mentioned that there are going to be additional guidance later, or I guess I'm not clear on that part. And then on this page here, on the box to the right, the top, where it says the eligible LEA that's going to administer TK is required to coordinate with a local childcare and early learning providers. So I wonder, I know that you mentioned there's only one tribal compact school, but perhaps in the future there's going to be more. And I wonder if instead of, well, in addition to local, that you might insert tribal childcare and early learning providers.
Thank you for that feedback. Regarding the later guidance, so this is tricky with timing, and this is where it's difficult. We need to publish our draft of our permanent rules, right? And so it will likely be difficult when we have this vague reference to guidance that will be developed, or processes that will be developed. So we are doing our best to have guidance ready, so it's reviewable at the same time as the proposed permanent rules, or at least be able to call out what will be included in guidance. So at a minimum, the guidance will include the 3 bold items below. At a minimum, there will be other operating, we will clarify anything that's in rule within our operating guidelines for TK programs. But 1550 requires at minimum guidance in these areas. So Washington State, obviously we've done a lot of work on this historically. So our hope is not to recreate, but to pull from already great work that exists to develop these best practices and work closely with our partners at DCYF. So it's kind of a funny timeline because we need the permanent rules out and we need the guidance out at the same time, but we can't finalize guidance till we know exactly what the permanent rules will be. So they're being developed at the same time.
And then I know that I imagine OSPI will be sending out information on the public comment period. And I know I subscribe, so I get the all of the newsletters, etc., and announcements. But I wonder if that's something, if you want to share with the Office of Tribal Relations at DCYF, and we can send out that information through our listserv as well.
Of course.
Just to make sure that we distribute to the tribes that participate in the Indian Policy on Early Learning Committee for IPEL.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes left. So I, again, my email address was on the first slide. I can pop it into the chat as well. Any feedback, love to hear any feedback from this group. Hopefully there'll be additional, again, opportunities as we launch the draft rules. We will share the hearing date. We will share a copy of the draft rules, provide an opportunity for feedback through multiple avenues. But at the end of the day, you are always welcome to reach out as things come to mind. And everything that we publish will be on our TK site, OSPI site, and shared broadly. So anything that's shared with districts on operations will also be located on this site. Umberto, anything to add?
Yeah, I captured all the comments, but I think, like Samantha mentioned, you're welcome to email us as well. And thank you all. It's always great to be here.
I just want to check in to make sure there are no final comments or questions for Samantha and or Umberto. We do have 4 more minutes before we move to break. Yeah, I see a question from Lois. Will we receive a copy of this presentation? Is that something, Samantha and Umberto, you can share with Jessica, and we can just send it out when we send out the information from ELAC?
Of course, you can include it in however ELAC communicates. I would like to just reiterate the fact that if you share it with your networks, know that the language isn't final, right? So what happened when TK and House Bill 1550 was initially going, a lot of networks had the old language and not the new language. So just I would say just be mindful, this is a draft, so please share it and share feedback, but all in draft form. And I actually do want to go back up and address one other question from let's see, Susan, really quick, about enforcing the rules. I will say this, that 1550 does require OSPI to develop a process for site visits. So we will work with our local ESD, DCYF, and internally on visiting on those TK sites. So we are developing processes for site visits of all TK programs. It probably looks a little different than what you're looking at, but OSPA does have processes in place for monitoring some federal programs. So we're looking at ways we can incorporate that with TK.
I would just add, what I'm concerned about is the coordinated enrollment component, because I personally have heard feedback from providers in districts that were not listed there, perhaps, but where they'll contact the principal and said, you just recruited kids from my program, but you were supposed to talk to me first. The rules are not every kid's eligible, so on and so forth. So I think there needs to be some sort of mechanism for that process as well, because it's been referred to as poaching kids from childcare to fill TK programs. And I don't think that's a reputation OSPI wants TK to have.
And I know schools don't either. You know, we've worked with a lot of schools across the state, and we rely on our healthy, robust childcare system in our community. So I absolutely agree. I think part of it will be communication, that PD component, messaging, training. So we do need to, and just lack of understanding of the early learning system in some places. So our hope, and we've talked about this at DCYF, is that we will strengthen that understanding of the early learning system, and including that coordinated recruitment and enrollment piece. Thank you so much. Yes, I agree. We'll mark it as draft. TK teachers will follow the same protocols as all K-12 kindergarten teachers and staff, as far as background checks, safety trainings, and fingerprinting. Hey, I think we're at time. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Well, thank you again, Samantha and Umberto. Really appreciate the presentation and the opportunity for Q&A. It is 12:11. We're going to take a 4-minute break while I don't think all of our other presenters are here yet, and we will resume at 12:15 for our final presentation of the day. Welcome back, everyone. It is 12:15. Jessica, are you able to advance the slide? Okay, thank you so much. So I'd just like to introduce our next presenters. We have with us today Cass Wilkerson, Michelle Larimer, and Debbie Groff. And they are all here to provide us with updates, as well as to get some information on early learning language access.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Can we go to the next slide? Awesome. My name is Cass Wilkerson, and I am here to share some early learning language access updates with you for our early learning division. So like I said, I'm here to share in particular the early learning division updates. My name is Cass Wilkerson, and I'm a language access coordinator for the Spanish language. And the work that I'll be sharing is a part of my work and my colleague Abdullahi. And we can go ahead and start with sharing 2023. It was a year of growth in language access for us. And a piece of that growth was really streamlining our language access supports in terms of us coordinators, like what we could support the division with. And in developing that process, we were able to track some information and statistics on what we've been supporting. And as of today, we've completed 176 project requests, and they span from things like translation, interpretation, quality assurance, and provider engagement. And to the right here, you can see the chart that says since October 2022, this is when we started tracking this data, and we have 176 in total requests completed, and 112 of those were Somali requests, and 64 were Spanish requests. And I think that just really shows the internal capacity and the difference for each language. We have more Spanish speakers internally that are able to complete some of these requests versus the Somali language. We also supported direct community engagement efforts like webinars, UX design processes, and community work groups, spanning from topics like grants, designations, and staff qualifications and training. And lastly, we continued collaboration with our partners and the division, particularly around language alignment. We have Spanish and Somali specific glossaries that we have been working with external partners in establishing. And internally, we've also established a language access committee for our early learning division. So I shared a lot about 2023 and what we've done, but we also want to share with y'all where we're headed in 2024. So we can go to our next slide, please. So some of our immediate priorities and strategies for 2024 as language access coordinators is to initiate centralized data collection to better understand our community needs, implement resource identification to enhance our team efficiency and collaboration, and foster deeper collaboration among our diverse language staff. And what we just shared is really a really high level overview of what we've been doing, but we do want to just give y'all time to really see what we've been doing. And that's what I have to share. And so I'm going to pass the floor to Michelle Larimore from Child Care Subsidy.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is Michelle Larimer, and I'm the Child Care East Administrator within the Early Learning Division. I'm centrally located in the state in Ellensburg, and I support 8 of the Eastern Washington Child Care Subsidy teams in the call center. And I work very closely with my colleague, Trissay Taylor, who is here also, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hey everybody, my name is Trissay Taylor, and like Michelle, very proud administrator for the West Side, and we work very closely together with the subsidy team.
If we could advance to the next slide, please. And then next, yes, thank you. Okay, in support of clear communication, we provide translated letters and forms needed for working best with our families and our providers. Trisha, would you like to take the next bullet?
Sure, and we've identified that we have approximately 141 different languages that we have forms and letters that we translate for currently.
In the call center, to help support the different languages, we work with 3 different interpreter services to ensure that we can get the language needed to help support the communities that we serve with our families and providers.
Yeah, and so we have staff that are certified in different languages that are able to assist our clients when they call in, or if we're doing what we call batch work, which is paperwork that is sent in through electronically, and they're able to translate it themselves. Currently, right now, our predominant dual language is Spanish, and we have certified staff in that language. We also have 1 staff member who is certified in Russian, although we don't have a high business need for that. We do have the certified Russian speaker that's been in place. And I was just telling Michelle, looking at the previous slide from Cass, that where there's a high Somali need, we actually don't have a high business need for translated services for Somali yet, but we do have a worker right now that does speak Somali, but they're not certified yet.
Yeah, and so that's the end of our presentation. Unless there are any questions for us, I can pass this next to Debbie Groff of licensing.
Tracy. Debbie Groff, I'm Child Care Deputy Senior Administrator, and I believe Travis Hansen is also present. He may pop on if I need some support in delivering this information, but I come to you from the Walla Walla area, but I work statewide and oversee with Travis all of child care licensing. So 2023 has been a huge year for childcare licensing as well. We are really invested and interested and hopeful in expanding access to different languages, not only for our early learning providers, but for providers and stakeholders and partners, as well as our internal staff. So here's a few things that we've been working on in childcare licensing. So we have been very intentional in hiring dual language or multi-language licensing staff. We are going to continue to post a position in the King County area to fill a multi-language or dual language position for a Somali speaker because the need is ever increasing. I think we have 2 Somali speaking licensors who are certified at this time, but the need is continuing to grow, and we need to just keep outreaching and trying to fill a licensing position to better support that language need. We have recently had new contracts for interpretive and translation services, so we wanted to make sure that all of our staff were up to date on who and how to access those services. So we put that information out in front of our staff so that it was easily accessible, not only for the need that comes to their attention, like the immediate need, but also for a potential visit that they might need to take somebody even on site with them or use a language line via telephone. We have had one sheet that we put together with our legal letters that let folks know that they can ask for that document to be translated or into a language of their need, and we send those out with every single legal letter that is delivered to a provider at this time. And we are also looking at what are other contact points or touch points that we need to be including that same document, so that providers know that they absolutely have the right and should ask for those documents to be translated. We're continually working with our staff to make sure that when they are on site or via phone or having any contact with providers, that they are ensuring that the person they're talking to knows they have the right to ask for interpretive services, but so do our licensors. And sometimes our providers might not ask for that, but for our needs to better work with providers and better understand what's going on, our staff need to know that they can actually reach out for that same interpretive need. Next slide. We've also been working with our Walk Compass system as well as the provider portal to better access the need of language across the state of Washington with our childcare providers and early learning professionals. We have an ability to grab data that is the primary language or languages spoken in a childcare setting, and also the language of instruction in a childcare setting. We can note in Walk Compass a primary and a secondary language, but we're also working on a better way to connect with providers to get this information and to ask the information in an appropriate way so that we're actually getting from the provider the language that we need to be focusing on in order to support that provider. So that is work that is continuing. We're looking at our data collection systems in Walk Compass to better collect that information. Right now, it comes from the provider. When a provider applies for a child care license, they let us know their primary and secondary language if they want to. It's not a mandated opportunity or a position in the portal or even in the written paper application process. But what we're trying to do, and this is what we're going to need your support with, we're trying to reach out to providers to let them know that this is a safe ask, that this is an ask that we need to get the information so that we can absolutely better communicate with our providers. So with that being said, we have a survey that I believe someone's going to put in the chat that will ask some really good questions of you as to how we need to go about this language access ask. We do want your feedback. We need your feedback. We need your feedback as early learning professionals and childcare providers so that we are asking the questions in the right way, using the right language, so that providers really feel that this is an opportunity to put the information into our system so that we can better support them. So I believe that was put into the chat. And that's about what we have for childcare licensing, Travis, unless you have something to add.
Nope, gonna stay out of your way. Did a great job.
Okay. So I believe any of us on that last presentation are open to any questions. I know it's getting towards the end of this very, very packed agenda, but we'll hang in there if somebody has something that they need to ask us about. Okay, Enrique, I think everybody's hungry. They need to go to lunch.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to check in. I know that Jessica provided the link in the chat, but I didn't know if this was also maybe using this space to address some of the questions that you have on your surveys as well.
Sure, and I believe this, you can go in and do the survey now, or you can save it and do it at another time. But again, I think there's even opportunity within the survey to write in anything that we have missed. So if we're not asking the right questions, please let us know what those questions are.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, then we will move on and do some wrap up. But thank you so much for well, I'm going to make sure I get everyone, Debbie and Travis and Cass and Michelle, and I'm sure I've forgotten someone, but everyone for speaking about early learning language access and sharing with us this afternoon. And Erin and Jessica, if we can make sure to include that survey in the documents that are also sent out to the larger group, because I know not everyone was able to attend the ELAC meeting. So that way, that gives everyone an opportunity to provide feedback to help inform the process. Great, thank you, Erin. So now, in terms of wrap up, just a couple of things. So I know that Jessica just put in the chat the link to the Mentimeter, just to provide us some feedback about how you felt about today's meeting. Also, what's going to be placed in the chat and also sent out is an opportunity to provide feedback through a reflection survey for any of the topics that were discussed today. Why don't we take a minute to access the link and provide some feedback here at this time? Okay, and as everyone is providing feedback, just a reminder that our next public meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February the 6th, 2024. And then we will also be sending out the full 2024 schedule with the follow-up emails from today. And with that, we're going to end early, give you back some time. Thank you so much for joining the ELAC meeting today, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.